Welcome to Real Vision, the Defiant's weekly collabcast. Normally, I would commence proceedings with some gleefully flippant verbal volley, but given what's going on in the world, it doesn't really seem appropriate. Joining me from the other side of the pond are Real Vision's Ash Bennington and the Defiant's Camila Russo. And of course, the story that's been like everywhere is, of course, Ukraine. And Camila, we've had some really interesting developments from our side in terms of communities banding together in various different ways to help support the Ukraine in the middle of all of this. Can you give us an outline of some of the things that you've seen from the kind of DeFi and crypto side? Because it's been pretty interesting the last week.
Yeah. I think what the Ukraine crisis has started to show is that censorship resistance and decentralization really matters. It's like people forget how much it matters until something really dire happens, and that's where we're at the moment. Um, we've seen how crypto has helped both Ukraine and potentially individuals in Russia um, maintain their savings and get around to have permissionless global transfers and get around to censorship from the international banks and sanctions. There is kind of a positive way of looking at how crypto is being used, um, and that is how people have been rallied together uh, in support of Ukraine. And so it comes from like just officially Ukraine putting out their crypto addresses for donations. Um, and millions of dollars have been raised in both Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then there's this whole story of other crypto founders jumping on that thread, and for example, Gavin Wood saying you should add a Polkadot address, Justin Sun demanding Tron to be added as well. So everyone wants to kind of be there in support for Ukraine. And so far, what was the latest numbers? I think it was over
That they've
like
raised. They've raised about
yeah,
they've raised about 40 million.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
what's interesting here is that there've been various different mechanisms that have been set up. There've been various DAOs. So there's the Ukraine DAO that Pussy Riot set up. They sold an NFT, one of an NFT, and it actually finished today. I was tracking it as it happened. The bid for it, the final bid was 2,173 ETH, which is around $6.3 million for a one of one. So they raised that. Unchained Fund is another one. Actually, one of the multi-syncs on the account is actually someone I used to work with at Harmony, Nick Vasilich. I was sort of surprised to see his name on there. It brings it home when it's real like that. These are people you've worked with, and suddenly they're in this situation. They're raising money. What's really interesting about all this is the speed at which it's happened, but also some of the other things that have happened as well. For instance, Ukraine asking exchanges to freeze Russian and Belarusian crypto accounts, which seems completely counter to the spirit of crypto in the first place. So, on the one hand, we've got like all this positive stuff, but also we're really getting to the heart of what decentralization actually means in real time. It's really fascinating to see it play out. And Ash, I'm curious what it's like from your viewpoint. What have you seen? What's struck you here?
Well, Robin, first of all, you and Cami are spot on as always. I've been reading the Defiant coverage of this. You guys are doing an incredibly granular job. Look, our remit is to talk about the role of digital assets, but I think it's first important to talk about the fact that what we are seeing right now is civilians in harm's way in the heart of Europe. This is a horrific humanitarian crisis. We see people in Kyiv, in Kharkiv, and other major cities in Ukraine subjected to shelling, residential buildings being hit by rockets in the heart of Europe. This is a significant geopolitical situation that we're witnessing unfold here. Obviously, the most serious conflict in the heart of Europe since World War II. Obviously, the former Yugoslav republics fought a very bloody de facto civil war in the 1990s. But this nuclear armed superpower potential proxy war is something that is incredibly potentially destabilizing to global security. With that said, to pick up on the points that you both made, I think incredibly important to talk about the way that digital has changed the nature of the way that wars are fought. Right now, we are seeing the first ever social media war fought in Europe, the first ever war where digital assets, censorship resistant digital money are at the core of the conversation, at least for people who follow financial markets. The role of cyber warfare, something that is still being sorted out. This is all very significant. The world here is changing before our eyes. One final point would be to talk about particularly Bitcoin. Bitcoin rallying from about $38,000 to $44,000. This is significant because it is the first time we've seen this reversal of this trend where there's the correlation trade, the joke in financial markets being that correlations go to one, everything trades risk on or risk off. Not so. What we are seeing now, in fact, is Bitcoin rallying on increased geopolitical risk. This is what Bitcoiners in particular have been talking about for many years. The idea that off the grid digital assets would actually increase in value when there was risk to the global financial system. We're seeing that play out in real time here, Robin.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren uh, said cryptocurrencies risk undermining sanctions against Russia, allowing Putin and his cronies to evade economic pain. US financial regulators need to take this threat seriously and increase their scrutiny of digital assets. In the last show, we talked about specifically how very, very sophisticated the tools for analyzing blockchains and illicit so-called transactions are these days. I think Elizabeth Warren is kind of missing the point here. She's seeking to demonize cryptocurrencies without really understanding either the nature of the sanctions themselves or the nature of the blockchain, that you cannot simply just flood the market with your assets you're trying to offload and nobody notice. It's just not the way it works. So I'm really curious what she's after here, what she's trying to say, because it ends up with her looking kind of foolish, to be honest. Cami, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out Ash's point previously about Bitcoin rallying. I thought it was especially interesting that Bitcoin was rallying even more in Ukrainian and Russian local exchanges. So there is a premium that is spreading in the Ukrainian local currency and in rubles in the Bitcoin price in Russia and Ukrainian exchanges locally, because there's an increased demand from Ukrainians and Russians to buy Bitcoin to protect their savings. I mean, we've seen how the ruble has massively depreciated in the past couple of days, and that is affecting everyday people in Russia. Who, I mean, we shouldn't demonize everyday Russians who have no real kind of part in this conflict and who are being affected by it. Probably, more than most. So Bitcoin is a way out for them, and that's reflecting in local exchanges. And so are people in Ukraine going to Bitcoin to protect their savings, and that's reflecting in that spread. And that's why Elizabeth Warren's statement is so foolish, because it's, sure, like maybe Russia can use crypto to avoid sanctions, but that's extremely unlikely, because it's not like Russia will go through some like peer-to-peer exchange if it wanted to avoid sanctions. Like it would have to go through like a major OTC desk or a major centralized exchange to do that. And those centralized places, they can enforce sanctions. So it's like it's very unlikely that Russia can effectively actually use crypto to avoid sanctions. But the people who can use crypto effectively to protect their savings are everyday Russians on the street. And so why would Elizabeth Warren want to like go against them? That's exactly what crypto is being used for now, and why it's so important and revolutionary. It just gives people power over their money.
So I think one of the arguments was that Russia would get around SWIFT by using some kind of cross-border payment system, and then everyone says, "Oh, well, of course you mean Ripple."
Right. That's gonna work.
Never gonna happen. So if you look at everything that Russia attempts to do to control its own narrative, to control everything that's going on, like a decentralized system is literally the last thing that they want. It's literally the last thing that they would ever want. So it just seems so illogical.
Yeah.
Um, as digital assets, that's good for them, but like decentralized networks, not so good for them. So whatever Russia ends up using instead of Swift, it definitely won't be crypto.
Robin, if I could jump in, Cami makes some excellent points as always. Just to put a little bit of color and context around the premium. So right now, Bitcoin, according to reporting by CoinDesk, is trading at a 6% premium against the Ukrainian hryvnia. This is UAH is the currency code for this. Obviously, these are things that most of us are just learning about for the first time who don't follow Eastern European currency markets. The premium, that 6% premium that's been cited as being seen on Whitebit. This is the most popular cryptocurrency exchange in Russia and also used by a fair number of Ukrainian users as well. To get back to the Elizabeth Warren point, obviously individual politicians, particularly folks who are not in the weeds with what's happening in crypto, occasionally make statements that are, let's just say, a little bit of a mismatch with reality in certain cases. But not to pick on any one individual in particular, I think the broader point here, Robin, is what I was alluding to at the top of the show, which is that we are seeing this sort of enormous regime shift in the way that we think about these core issues, the nature of the money supply, sovereignty. These are some really significant changes that are happening, and it's very difficult for folks who are embedded in a legacy system to understand precisely what is going on here. So this is an intergenerational challenge, I think, as we make these shifts from things like SWIFT to digital assets. This is just a very significant and material change that we're seeing. Obviously, to echo some of Cami's points, which I think are spot on as always, the challenge that Russia would have in evading sanctions regimes, liquidity, connectivity, in many ways, very difficult to do at scale at the level of a nation state. I don't really think that is a significant risk right now. However, in a decade, is it possible that digital assets could allow nation states to avoid sanctions regimes? You better believe it. So it is something that I'm sure folks in Washington, D.C. and policy circles in the Pentagon, at the Department of Treasury are thinking about right now.
Yeah, they often raise the specter of Iran's supposed Bitcoin mining facilities that are enabling them to get around sanctions. That's definitely a story I would love to cover at some point because I think it's genuinely really interesting. And you made the point that we're seeing these brand new money supply paradigms coming through. And one of the strangest things that I saw this morning, I woke up to the news that the official Ukrainian Twitter account was announcing an airdrop. What? I mean, they've been talking up a big game in terms of receiving donations in ETH and BTC, but this is such a crypto thing to do. So the text is this: airdrop confirmed. Snapshot will be taken tomorrow, March the 3rd at 6 p.m. Kiev time. Follows subsequent news regarding Ukraine's crypto donation campaign at Fedorov Mikhailo. Cami, can you first just explain what airdrops are and why they're such big things and why this is such a strange thing for the Ukraine to announce? It's so bizarre.
Yeah, so airdrops, I think, became popular with Uniswap in, when was it, 2020, end of 2020?
Yes.
Yeah, so Uniswap airdropped the Uni token to everyone who had interacted with the Uniswap DEX, decentralized exchange. So it was like a retroactive airdrop rewarding those who had participated in the protocol. From then on, this has been very common in, I think, most DeFi and Web3 protocols. The way to launch a token is to give it away for free for the communities that have already been engaged in their platform. Um, and so you take a snapshot. It's like a, yeah, like a picture of the blockchain at a certain time to record all the addresses that are receiving an airdrop, to have like a cutoff time. So all these terms are just like very, very crypto native, like airdrop, snapshot. And for like an official like Twitter of a country to be using these terms, it's very it's very weird. So yeah, that was the news. That I mean, if you kind of take the way that crypto has been doing this as a model, I guess like everyone who has donated to Ukraine uh, would be part of this snapshot and then receive a retroactive airdrop of I don't know what, to reward them for donating. That's kind of what I can deduce from that tweet, though it doesn't give any details as to like what it's being airdropped or to whom, and like what the snapshot is for, etc. But you can kind of assume that's what it's about.
Well, the joke around airdrops is that you get worthless governance tokens, and the joke around this one is that you will get worthless government tokens, which I think is pretty funny. There's really no detail about what it's going to be, but what it did do was it stimulated a massive influx of funds to the donation accounts. So there's a net positive here, even if it is just a meme and it's a worthless token. They have raised a lot more money. So, and I think when I checked this morning, it was around 7 million and just gone rushing in. But of course, these are just, airdrop mercenaries looking to hoover up the tokens. What was really interesting is that the accounts are open. You can go and look at what's in the wallets, but they've also NFTs in there. And someone dropped a CryptoPunk into the Ukraine account. So the Ukraine account that owns a CryptoPunk, it's valued around kind of 237 grand or something like that. This is wild. Absolutely wild. Ash, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, as Cami said, for people who are relatively new to this space, airdrops are a perplexing topic. I think of it as effectively a way for networks to give an ownership stake, a participatory stake to people who have been involved in the network, who have participated in the network. I usually use the metaphor of Facebook. If you were an early Facebook user, for example, you got bragging rights, and Mark Zuckerberg and the early founders, and the early employees of that company got the equity. The idea of a token drop is to attempt to bring in some of that ownership stake. Probably not a term they like to use because of the security aspect of it, but some economic interest in the network itself to the early users. I think that the first token drop I got was ENS, Ethereum name system, where you name service, where you actually were able to get some of those ENS tokens if you went and registered, for example, your name as an ENS name. And so this idea that you have a sovereign government doing a name drop, as kind of you guys both covered, we don't really know what that means yet. We don't really know how that participation is going to happen. But again, to Cami's point, this is very much a crypto native term, and it does sort of make the broader point that I was hinting at earlier, which is we're just seeing a tremendous shift here in the paradigms that are in play in terms of the way governance, nation states think about the world. This crypto native aspect to it. Now, I know cynics will say this is something that's very gimmicky, but look, the reality is we are witnessing here in real time this shift being made into the digital asset space, and there's just no more sort of powerful and emotionally loaded, intense time to do that than during a time of war and conflict. So it is incredibly interesting to watch how these things unfold and how it affects the broader digital asset ecosystem that the three of us cover, Robin.
Well, what's interesting here is that in the announcement, they say subsequent news regarding this donation campaign will be on Mikhailo Fedorov's account. So I went and looked at Mikhailo Fedorov. He's the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine and Minister of Digital Transformation of Ukraine. He's been one of the loudest voices surrounding, Apple, etc., shutting off services to Russia. And I mean, the weirdest thing I've seen today, I mean, there's been a lot of weird things. There's a campaign, this is from his account, where he says, everyone wants Putin to die. Until this happens, we give Ukrainians of the whole world a unique opportunity to send Putin to Jupiter donate $2.99 for a rocket. All funds will be directed to the restoration of the destroyed infrastructure. So you can go to the website, which is putla.io, and there's this weird animation of Putin in a rocket, and then you can donate $2.99. I don't even know what to make of this anymore. This is a young guy, handsome Ukrainian politician, part of a new breed. But like, can you say? I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm looking at anymore.
I
Like the
think it's,
meme, the
like, just like,
memification of everything is just off the charts now.
and you have to remember, like, Zelensky himself, he's a very kind of unorthodox politician. Like, he was a comedian, and he created his own party. Like, he's very, like, outside of the Ukrainian establishment, and it was a very kind of like surprise win for him. He kind of, like, as I understand it, came a little bit out of nowhere, like this TV comedian. Um, and as such, like, he and his team understand communications very well, and so they use it very, very effectively. They kind of connect with an audience. They use humor. They know memes. They're younger, and so, yeah, this conflict, I don't think the world has seen anything like it before. Just like using crypto for donations, using memes, and just like being, and the way that we are consuming the news, it's just like on Twitter all day. It's like we're getting this stream of what's happening in like minute to minute, in a way that I don't think conflicts were previously covered. Like, I saw this tweet, and like, just as this was breaking, and somebody said, okay, where's the Ukraine Russia stream at? And it's like, like, I think everyone related to that, because, like, we're so used to kind of like seeing everything real time, and like we kind of are with this conflict. And I think that's what's kind of inspired a lot of people to help, like with crypto donations. But not just that, like, I was just seeing this report last night about how people in London are going to the Ukrainian embassy to enlist to fight. Just like, not Ukrainians, like people outside of Ukraine are actually going to fight to Ukraine because they've been inspired by this. And yeah, I think just like the fact that we're seeing this play out so closely in real time is contributing to that.
Hey, Robin, if we've been talking about this on and offline about how baffling this is to the three of us. We spend our lives in this space. Now imagine you're a 70-something-year-old senator, a career employee at the Department of State or Department of Treasury, and you're trying to digest all of this new information, understand what it means for the conflict, understand what it means for your own national sovereignty. This is one of those moments that we're going to look back on and see as an inflection point, I think, where we started to see a transition from the old world to this new world that the three of us live in and try and figure out every day of our lives.
Yeah, certainly the case. Some of the big heroes of this space are probably a stone's throw away from being hackers, like hackers who take down networks that take down. I mean, there is an anarchic idea embedded in crypto. This is very threatening, and yet, in one single flip of a coin, they can become the heroes of a movement. And it's really hard to know where you sit in all of this, because there are such conflicting opinions, and I find myself pulled this way, that way, this way, that way, and the only thing I can do is try and read what the other side is saying. And even I don't know what the other side is anymore, but I've been trying to read, you know, what was the US's role in 2014 in the Ukraine, and how might that have got us here, and then going back and remembering that Zelensky was involved in that ridiculously weird situation with Trump and Biden, and trying to coerce the Ukrainian people in. I mean, it was just bizarre, and I completely forgotten about it. And suddenly there it was. It's the same guy. And so, just trying to filter and sift the information is proving overwhelming at times. I'll be honest. But I think it's time to let go of Ukraine and allow ourselves to be underwhelmed by some artwork in the shape of Pixelmon. Let me just shape this one up for you. If I gave you $70 million, would you give me crap artwork in return? And if you did, what would the result be? So this is Pixelmon, which was one of these big hyped NFT projects, 10,000 pieces for an art, for pixelated metaverse characters. And it's called Pixelmon, so the relation to Pokemon is obviously there. And these guys released these NFTs. They sold them for quite a lot of money, relatively speaking. 3 ETH down to about 2.3 was the Dutch auction range. And then the art revealed, and it was just an absolute shit show. Just one of the worst things I've ever seen. And yeah, I mean, 70 million. So Cami, what's your take on this one? Did you read through it?
I did. Like I was just cracking up at seeing these NFTs pop up on my Twitter feed. I couldn't believe, that this happened. That people paid $70 million for this, and this is what they get in return. So a bit more context. There was a Dutch auction, which means the auction starts at a high price at 3 ETH, and then it starts going down with time. Dutch auctions are meant to, if there's a lot of appetite for something, you kind of get as much money as you can, rather than having a flat price. If you start out with a higher price, and you just capture all of the demand that's in the market for a project with a Dutch auction. So that's what they use, and with this they were able to raise 70 million, and NFTs were revealed after the purchase. So imagine like just spending a bunch of money and then getting something that it just like, it's hilarious how bad it is. Like, people listening, just like go and like Google Pixelmon, and just to get a laugh in this, in just this serious situation that we're living in. Pixelmon is like just like a breath of like fresh air, I guess. But I don't know. To me, it's like we've been seeing kind of like red flags in the NFT space, like so many scammers, so many kind of just like projects that aren't going anywhere, cash grabs, and Pixelmon is being accused of being just that, just a cash grab. Of course, the founder says they apologized. It said it was unacceptable, and that they are using the money raised to produce an actual kind of better version of this, and a real game that people will be able to participate in. And so who knows, like the jury's still out. Maybe they do deliver, but what they've delivered so far is just hilarious. It's beyond kind of underwhelming. It's I think though, like, this has potential to become like a cult classic. It's like, oh, I own one of the like botched Pixelmon NFTs because they're just like so unbelievably ugly. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a sign of where we're at with NFTs, which we've talked about before. How they've been kind of late to fall along with the rest of crypto. Like crypto had a massive crash, now it's rebounding. But NFTs kind of like held up relatively well during the crash, and so I don't know. It seems like we still haven't seen an NFT market bust, and so we're still seeing examples like these of like projects that haven't even revealed the art yet, being able to raise 70 million. To me, it's a little bit it's incredible that there's still this kind of hype in the market.
Ash, did you see these eyesores? I did, Robin. I think Cami may be right. It may be sort of a cult thing, like a really campy horror film, where you can see the director like dumping the blood from the top of the shot. We joke about it. It's amusing, but and maybe this is something that we say all the time, but it bears repeating about just how early it is in this space, just how these are getting sorted out right now. Look, without regard to any particular project, I think it's probably reasonable to say that some of these projects are going to go to zero or near zero. Some of them could be breakout successes. Very hard to pick which are which at this early stage of the game. This is something that is obviously highly speculative in the very earliest stages. And as we can see, occasionally things misfire. With this particular project, we're going to see if they can get it back on track. But this is just the nature of something where you're basically looking at a project that's still in effectively the laboratory phase, right? And sometimes the test tubes break, and that's what we're witnessing right now. I think this is a long way to go before it's ready for prime time. But all that said, the kernel of the idea, the power of NFT communities. This was interesting. They were going to do this kind of real world RPG, kind of like Pokemon, where you walk around the world and you physically discover and are able to pick up these NFT tokens. This is the kind of thing I think Pokemon surprised many people. It was really the first mobile game that broke through in something that had a virtual reality, real world RPG framework. It was obviously a huge success at the time. What that looks like in the digital asset space, still yet to be seen, but a tremendous amount of promise here, sort of despite the misfire, the miscue, and some obviously derision that we saw on Twitter and Discord and elsewhere.
There are so many talking points here. I mean, the first one is the Dutch auction. The last time we saw a project really hype up like this, it was the Lava Labs project Meebits. So there was a Dutch auction there as well. And what tends to happen is people go, "Oh, I'm going to miss out," and then just pile in. So the Dutch auction is supposed to make price discovery happen in real time, and then you arrive at a price where everyone feels comfortable and you get some early buyers. But basically here, everyone just piled in. Everyone's searching for that next big unicorn moment. So that was one thing. And that's not their fault that they put it this way. The idiots who buy in, it's their fault. So I went back to look at what this project was promising. And then I see just a bunch of things that really just are troubling. So their vision was to create the largest and highest quality NFT game the space has ever seen. They talked a big game, like they wanted to be AAA. They wanted to create the first AAA quality game of the NFT space. The thing that was really interesting, they released a demo. So you could download the demo and actually play it, which I did. And it was garbage. And it just brought home something that I've been exposed to recently a great deal, which is that there is a massive disconnect between the faith and belief that this space has about its context in the world of games, particularly video games, and where it really is at. We've been spending hours and hours and hours trying to make video inside a game engine, Unreal Engine, being exposed to the vagaries of what it takes to actually do anything in a game engine. And it's really, really, really hard, like really beyond hard. Any idiot that's saying, yeah, we're going to make a AAA game is lying, first of all. And it's no wonder that the game industry hates NFTs, which they do with a passion. And I get it. I get it because they hear these crypto bros talking about how they're going to have interoperable assets and they're going to have these AAA games. It's nonsense. They're not. They're not. And if you want a Pokemon game, go and play Pokemon. There's a brand new Pokemon coming on the Switch, and it's going to be amazing. Go play that. There is absolutely 100% a place for real, genuine games. But I would be so skeptical of any team that doesn't have 20 plus years of making games. And I spoke to a game developer this last week who said, yeah, a lot of the criticism around NFTs is correct, but also incorrect, because he said, as an indie game developer, we get a really rough deal. And right now we have this tiny opportunity to actually carve out a place for ourselves financially and subsist and create games with this NFT technology built in from the ground up. You can go and interrogate teams and ask them the hard questions, but unless they're giving you those kind of answers and telling you exactly why the NFT needs to be there, it's probably not worth bothering with. And so this project, 70 million, I have no faith in it at all. It's garbage, to be honest with you. And that doesn't mean that all NFTs are garbage, but this one, genuinely, honestly, garbage. So there you go. I spent a lot of time trying to understand NFT haters' point of view, and to be honest, they're kind of right. And it's not, and like AAA games as well. Like they've got huge problems at the moment because they keep trying to cram in microtransactions, and gamers are really pissed off with them, with the big game companies, because they keep delivering substandard games. So it's a really weird time for the game industry as a whole, and they definitely do not want NFTs. So, you know, long way to go.
Yeah.
But it's not this anyway. So any last thoughts from both of you before we wrap this up?
For me, like the story is obviously Ukraine. It will continue to be Ukraine for a while, I think. And it's just heartbreaking to see what's happening. It's baffling that we're, it's 2022 and we're heading into, I mean, we're in war in Europe. And I think, for me, the the uh, the only encouraging thing that I see from our kind of where we're sitting and from our coverage is that crypto can actually provide an alternative for those on the ground suffering, losing their savings to depreciating currencies, who are affected by sanctions and by censorship and by problems with their bank. Crypto is actually working. It's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I think that's encouraging, and it just gives me even more optimism about the space that we're in, and I'm glad that we're here kind of covering it and helping more people know about the space and how important censorless and permissionless money is.
Well said. Ash.
Well, as usual, Cami has said it very well. Top of mind, of course, is the civilians who are in harm's way right now in Ukraine. Obviously, a very difficult time for people who are trapped in this conflict, particularly the civilians who are there, who are being shelled and rocketed. Incredibly difficult time. Number two, I would say, these big picture themes that we're talking about here, when things are very close to you, sometimes it's very difficult to get the big picture as we struggle to ask these questions about what does it mean that the nation of Ukraine is airdropping tokens to people who have donated. These big picture issues, the points that I made before, how we see international relations shifting in the age of social media, the import of cyber war, and of course, digital assets and censorship resistant money in the age of war in Europe. These are huge themes. In fact, the bigger picture idea is even bigger than that. The idea of sovereignty itself, decoupling of the money supply from the nation state, really the most significant change or challenge, I should say, to the dominant paradigm of nations organizing themselves since the 17th century, since the Treaty of Westphalia. We see people like Balaji Srinivasan talking about the network state rising as a potential alternative to the nation state. These are obviously huge ideas that people are going to be talking about for years and decades. Very big, hard to grasp ideas. We're trying to struggle with them right now in real time, and it's very difficult to get hold on them. But these are conversations we're going to continue to have on Real Vision, I'm sure, on the Defiant. And these are challenges that we're all struggling to understand. Finally, third point, as you might imagine an old markets guy to say, keep your eye on the price action. From a price action perspective, the interesting thing about what's happened, particularly with Bitcoin, is the decoupling of the traditional correlation trade here. The idea that during periods of geopolitical instability, the price of Bitcoin could rise rather than fall when you see, for example, US equities sell off. This is something new. This is something that Bitcoiners have been predicting for a long time, and we've seen it come to pass right now with this conflict in Ukraine, Robin.
So yes, I guess the final thing to say is keep a broad diet of news sources. Try and get your information from more than one place, because I don't think there's any right or wrong answer in any of this stuff. And it's certainly baffling for me to try and encapsulate all of that, all the conflicting ideas, and this constant state of cognitive dissonance. But I think if there's one thing that, as you said, Ash, that there's a human cost to all of this, and we should always put that first. And on that note, we will think of everyone who is suffering this week, wherever you are in the world, whether it's in Syria or in the Ukraine or anywhere else in the world. And we hope you have a much better week in all of this. See you next time.